The number one ranked 1500 meter runner in the world right now, Jakob Ingebrigtsen, will be taking on the recently crowned Olympic champion in Cole Hocker in the Lausanne Diamond League on the 22nd of August. The two will meet again in the Zurich Diamond League along with Jakob's arch rival and Olympic silver medalist Josh Kerr and 1500 meter bronze medalist who Jakob has also faced in other races, Jared Negus, in potentially the most stacked 1500 meter race we have ever seen in a Diamond League. The Diamond League in Zurich has first, second, third and fourth place in the Olympic final, so it's going to be crazy. But whilst you can bet I'll have a prediction video out on that race soon, let's focus on the duel between Cole Hocker and Jakob Ingebrigtsen coming up next weekend and see who is most likely to win that race and how. One of the biggest differences between this race and the Olympic final is that the Diamond League will have paces and pace lights, and these have been confirmed for the first 1000 meters of the race. As such, whilst championship races like the Olympics are often more tactical and slow, Diamond League events are more often like a time trial, and the paces will help athletes run their fastest times. This really suits Jakob, of course, as he has thrived in pace races given his supreme fitness, recently running a 3:26.73 in Monaco only last month, less than a second off the world record and I believe the third fastest time in history. Jakob's inability to win in championship races has been due to not performing well when paces are not there. He can't keep a fast enough pace to outwork everyone else like he is able to in the Diamond League. Sure, he can run a 3:28 low, but that just isn't fast enough to take the sting out of the kicks of the like of Cole Hocker and Josh Kerr. We of course saw this in the Olympic final where Jakob tried to take it out as fast as he could, but he showed that when paces aren't present, he's not at his best, as he faded pretty badly in the final 100 metres after what seemed to be a bit of a reckless charge down the back straight a lap ago. And this is what allowed more championship races like Cole Hocker to win. Although he may not be as fit as Jakob Ingebrigtsen, he can conserve energy by using Jakob to draft behind and then use his superior kick to beat the Norwegian over the last stretch. And whilst Jakob is an absolute aerobic phenom, he's not got the best finish compared to some of the other top contenders out there. Whilst Cole Hocker has run very fast times with a 3:27.65 in the Olympics, his real strength is in his super fast finish, which saw him outkick the likes of Josh Kerr in that final. However, if Jakob is able to run a low 3:27 time or even break into the 3:26s, then it seems unlikely that Cole Hocker will have that same closing speed to outkick Jakob in the final stretch. And given the presence of paces in this race, it's much more likely that Jakob is going to be able to do that. Who knows, we could even see a world record on our hands if Jakob's recovered well from the Olympics. To be honest, I don't see that happening anytime soon. Although the Monaco Diamond League was a stellar performance by Jakob, I don't think he's there quite yet, although I do see him breaking the record in the next year or two. That being said, another factor to consider is that whilst Cole Hocker has proven himself to be a serious contender on the world stage, he was relatively under the radar outside of America compared to the likes of Jakob Ingebrigtsen. The main rivalry going into that race was between him and Josh Kerr, so Cole Hocker kind of got forgotten about a little bit by non-American fans. And from Hocker's perspective, this means he'll be experiencing a sudden spike in popularity and interest from both brands and media. Winning the Olympic final is always going to do that for you. But winning the final in such a spectacular fashion and in probably one of the most hyped Olympic finals we've seen in years, he must be drowning in all the requests from media and brands to do deals and interviews with him. And whilst I'm sure he'll be able to handle it, this will definitely be a new experience for him and it will tire him out. Josh Kerr spoke about this after the race, about how it is very tiring to have to do constant media interviews, and he said that it was quite a new experience after he gained such popularity after his victory in the World Championships. So whilst I'm not saying that this is going to be a huge factor for Cole Hocker, I do think it's something to pay attention to. It also means that Jakob is going to be paying much closer attention to him than he was in the Olympic final. Hocker himself said that he benefited from not being as well known as the other racers, because it meant that Jakob was preoccupied with Josh Kerr, meaning that he made tactical decisions that in hindsight might not have been the best because they benefited Cole Hocker. I feel like Jakob was a little bit psyched out by Josh Kerr in the Olympic final. The move he made down the back straight was reckless and it came back to bite him, and I think this was as a result of being paranoid of Josh Kerr being able to outkick him. And the media build-up between Josh Kerr and Jakob Ingebrigtsen would have made him of course want to win this race, but especially not use to Josh Kerr. If we look at the last 200 metres of the Olympic final, we also saw that he moved out quite a lot in an effort to block Josh Kerr from overtaking him. Now whilst this was a good move to try and prevent Kerr from winning, it did leave plenty of space for Cole Hocker, a man known for his fast finish, to take the inside. I think if there hadn't been so much hype between the rivalry of Josh Kerr and Jakob Ingebrigtsen, and Hocker was a bit more on Jakob's radar, he wouldn't have given him so much space. Hocker no longer being a dark horse in this race, but actually a serious contender and the biggest threat to Jakob Ingebrigtsen, is going to change the dynamic and the tactics that Ingebrigtsen employs between them. So unless we have another major runner like Josh Kerr entering this Diamond League, which is incredibly unlikely, Hocker is going to need to run around Ingebrigtsen, and he's not going to benefit from the extra space that Jakob gave him in the Olympic final. It's these reasons, particularly the fact that the race is paced, is why I'm going for a classic Ingebrigtsen victory, where he tails the pacemakers from the beginning and simply runs away from the field with his superior fitness. The Diamond League requires less tactics if you're fitter than everyone else, and Jakob isn't stupid. He knows Hocker is going to beat him in the final 200 if the pace is not so quick to take the sting out of Hocker's kick. And whatever we can say about Jakob, he never holds back and he always goes for it. I don't see him being scared to set a fast pace, even though that puts him in a position to be shot down. His tactics were actually very solid in the Olympic final. He went out as hard as he could because he knew that Josh Kerr was going to be able to outkick him. And I'm sure he had Hocker on his radar somewhat as well. The problem wasn't in his tactics, but the fact that he wasn't fit enough to execute the correct tactics, and pace the race poorly in the end. But the fact that paces are there makes me think he's going to win the race fairly comfortably, as long as he's in good fitness. So given Jakob is a pretty solid favourite for this race, how should Cole Hocker go about trying to win this if we see a fit Ingebrigtsen turn up to the track? If Jakob is not in top form, then it's a simple case of sitting behind him like Kerr did and just out sprinting him in the final 100. But what if Jakob is in low 327 or even 326 shape? Well then in my opinion, Hocker is going to need to do something which is going to sound very strange, but it's actually to go to the front of this race from the very start. Make this race awkward and ugly for Ingebrigtsen. Go to the front and ignore the paces. Keep varying the speed from the race as much as possible. Speed up, slow down, cut Ingebrigtsen up a little bit, make the race dirty. Hocker is going to be able to use less energy from doing this, as Ingebrigtsen doesn't seem to respond well to variations in pace. Whereas Hocker's closing speed suggests that he's going to be able to adapt to that kind of race much better. Hopefully this will even out the difference in fitness between the two and remove Jakob's ability to run away from the field. Of course, Hocker is still going to need to keep a solid pace to stop Jakob from just overtaking him, but he needs to make it as awkward and difficult as possible for Jakob to just run away from the field. I said it before, but this is how Jakob was able to run such a fast time in Monaco. No one really challenged him, and they all let him take the front behind the pacers in the first 200 meters. By the 600 meter point, he'd run away from the field and the race was pretty much over. It was just a question of how much was he going to beat everyone else by. I'm not sure this tactic will be enough to work, and it is also a bit unsportsmanlike, so I don't see Hocker doing it. He doesn't exactly strike me as someone who'd be willing to employ slightly dirty tactics in order to win, but I can't think of any way that Hocker will be able to win this race against a fully fit Jakob Ingebrigtsen. The only concern that we might have is that Jakob still needs to be in top shape to eke out a victory. The Olympic final has shown us that whilst Cole Hocker is an insane finisher, he's also able to run a very fast race on top of that. 3:27.65 is no joke. Jakob has only run faster than that twice in his career. Whilst we cannot guarantee that Hocker will be able to equal his personal best, we also can't say for sure that he won't be able to better it. Both athletes are still going to be in that peak form from the Olympics, but Hocker has only had to recover from one race instead of two. Of course, in addition to the 1500 meter final, Jakob also had the 5000 meter heats and then a final itself which he won. That would have made the legs a little bit more tired and means he has to take a little bit of extra time to recover from that as well. Furthermore, unless Jakob radically shifts his usual front-running tactics, Cole Hocker is going to have the benefit of a pacemaker for the whole race in the Norwegian, whereas Jakob is only going to have that benefit for the first 2/3 of the race. Because of course the pacers drop out after the first 1000 meters, or potentially earlier if they're really feeling the burn, which is a little bit more likely if they ask for a super fast pace like a 3:26. We saw in Monaco the pacers were really struggling and Jakob was really having to tell them to keep in it, don't you dare drop out before the 1000 meter mark. So of course if Jakob isn't in top shape then we could see another upset. But Hocker doesn't want to go into a race relying on the fact that Jakob Ingebrigtsen fresh out of the Olympics won't be in good shape. So if I were him, that's what I'd try and do. Not that I think it will necessarily work. If Hocker is able to pull this off, then I still think it would be a huge upset, as the fact that this race is paced means I think Jakob is the favourite. Whilst we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves, it will prompt the conversation further of Jakob potentially transitioning to the 5000 meters, which I'll have a video out about soon. Nonetheless, I still think Jakob wins this race relatively easily, unless his fitness is much worse than we expected going into this. If you want to see exactly how Cole Hocker beat Jakob Ingebrigtsen and Josh Kerr in the Olympic final, then click on this video here. Thank you very much for watching the video guys, leave your thoughts in the comments below who do you think is going to win this race, and I'll see you in the next one. Happy training.